Hi, and welcome to the fourth episode of The Last Wave, where NG Dave and Michael Goetze delve into the latter's journey into the world of photography. Join them as they discuss his path towards becoming one of the most renowned drone photographers in Australia. As one of the co-founders of Salty Wings, Michael's unique perspective helped him capture the diverse Australian landscape like no one else. He also delves his interest in Bitcoin and shares his personal view on the topic. We hope you enjoy this episode, and please subscribe and share with friends if you do.
Welcome everyone to the first episode of The Last Wave, the first episode of 2024. We had 5 or 6 really good interviews and discussions. I wouldn't call them interviews in 2023. But I'm so pleased, and it's my honour today to kick off the 2024 season with my good friend Mike Goetze. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Dave. How's it going?
Yeah, well, good, thanks, Mike. And Mike and I go back 10, 15 years when we were both practicing yoga in a studio in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really good days. And not long after that, I think actually when we were both there practicing yoga, we used to catch up and have a chat about what was happening in the world. And I was particularly interested because you were the first person I met who was talking about Bitcoin back then. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things this morning, from Bitcoin, because Mike's been involved in it from the outset. And not only has he been involved in it from an economics point of view, he has a particular qualification, being a degree in mathematics. So I think that also helped him come to grips with it. So before we get going though, I'd just like to thank Davey, our pal, who's behind the camera. She does all the magic and setting everything up for these great get-togethers. So thanks, Davey. So Mike, when we met, I think it was like 10, 15 years ago, we were both living in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Bitcoin, and this is before it took off. I think it was under $100 a coin at that time. And I'd just be interested in what made you find your way to Bitcoin and how you came about it. And then I know that you stuck with it all the way, but you were really early in on it. So interesting.
I'll correct you firstly. I have a degree in economics.
Oh, economics, okay.
And commerce, whatever
Right.
that means. Yeah, I was doing engineering, commerce, and then finished with economics. So that was, it's hard to remember, maybe 2011.
Right.
I was doing my economics degree, and I was very unsatisfied with that degree. But I'm so grateful that I did it because it forced me to study economics, and that got me searching for different answers, I suppose, different points of view.
Well, that makes more sense than mathematics.
There was a bit of maths I did in engineering, but no, that wasn't my strong suit, or wasn't my preference. I was much more into economics and philosophy.
Excellent.
So yeah, I've discovered the Austrian School of Economics on the internet, and I know we've talked about that before.
Yeah, that's something else we have in common. The first sort of School of Economics that I got introduced to was the Austrian School of Economics through my mother, actually. Mm-hmm. She had a library full of books on von Mises and Hayek and Ayn Rand, who are the classic Austrian school writers. And
it's quite rare.
Yeah, and so I think it's also libertarian, isn't it? I mean, the Austrian School of Economics is the economic foundation of libertarianism. So that makes sense when you shift from understanding Austrian School of Economics to looking for a model that is decentralized, because the Austrian School of Economics, Libertarian School of Economics, is about government minimalisation through the whole of the political system, from money to letting the economy work itself out.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, big idea of theirs is the separation of money and state, to go back to how it used to be. I think when I was first studying it, they talked a lot about gold and silver and the early days in America. Austrian school hadn't quite caught up with Bitcoin yet. It was just a coincidence that I came across Bitcoin, and then slowly a lot of the Austrian professors have got onto it.
Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have passed many of your economics exams though, quoting Austrian School of Economics. It wasn't really in favour because they're more the Keynesian school.
It was
and
mathematics.
The social.
Yeah, it was all mathematics, demand supply models sort of thing. And all of my exams were multi-choice, so
yes.
I didn't even get a chance to write down any of those ideas.
Yeah.
And in tutorials, I remember talking about Austrian economics, and the tutors are maybe only a couple of years older than me.
Yes.
So there wasn't much discussion. It's kind of stick to the textbook.
I mean, it's one of the founding sort of fathers, I think, of the traditional economics that they teach at university was Adam Smith.
Yeah.
And The Wealth of Nations, well, I think was his book, and that set up the foundation for our economic model in a way, but it was also very much a model that justified and gave a foundation to the colonial economic model and the imperial economic model, which is the exploitation model, and it's again the mixed finance government interaction involvement. So okay, so you found your way to a brilliant school of economics. And
what year was it that you moved down south? I came down in 2015.
2015. We'd been here for 1 or 2 years, so that's we'd just settled in, and not long after that, you moved to the southwest.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point in your journey and your story, because first of all, why did you make the shift? You're pretty young. You've got your commerce economics degree. You'd already picked up a few Bitcoins, but they hadn't taken off. You're not at that point where you could retire or anything, but what age were you then?
2015, I was 27.
Right, okay.
So that's a year after I picked up surfing. So I think that was the big change in my life, was starting to surf. When I met you, I was doing yoga. It was kind of rehab, but also to manage my body from playing football. I was quite sore from football, and I found yoga was really helping to just stretch it out and feel better on a football field. But it wasn't until I picked up surfing that life really changed for me. I remember seeing you in Perth quite a few times surfing.
Right.
And that was around when we were having those chats about economics.
Yeah. Okay.
So I got my commerce degree, my economics degree, and then I just did nothing for a couple of years. Worked casual jobs, just hung out, started surfing. I wasn't really satisfied with what I'd learned at uni, and I wasn't ready or happy to just jump into a career in the city. I think that was what most people were doing once they got their degree. But something in me didn't want to do that. So when I started surfing, the option to move down south started to come up. And I took the plunge in 2015.
And that was a turning point, really. I think, one of the messages that, one of the stories that we like to, relate to people and our younger friends is to take time out to, have that gap year. Don't launch straight into the production line necessarily if it doesn't resonate with you, if you feel there's some other calling. And you took that plunge, you took that dive, you sort of went into the unknown.
Yeah.
I'm going to move down south. I'm going to do what I love, really, which is great. We always love to say to follow your passion, follow what you really enjoy, which you were doing. You're doing your yoga, you're surfing, you're hanging out down here. But at the same time, you've got that freedom to imagine, freedom to dream. which is a really important stage, that you went through, because it was in that stage, I think, that you came up with the idea for the really what's been your career since.
Yeah.
So we might move on to that.
Yeah, it was all stepping stones. So
Right.
when I was in Perth, so I probably took a couple of years off.
Uh-huh.
I was working casual jobs, but I wasn't working many hours. I was giving myself a lot of time. And yeah, those stepping stones the whole way that led me to where I am now.
Yeah, sure.
So retracing them, I guess, there's probably too many to remember. But
yeah.
In Perth, I was doing a couple of websites for friends.
Okay.
So that kind of got me onto Squarespace and Shopify, and I noticed in 2014, 2015 how good websites had become, or how much they'd advanced in just a few years. So I had my mind set on e-commerce. Me and my friends in Perth actually started a business. Well, created a business name, created a shareholders, I suppose. We started this business idea, but then nothing came of it. But that was always in the back of my mind to start a e-commerce business. I just wasn't sure how to do it. So started surfing. I was just following what I enjoyed doing, really. Going to the beach every day, surfing.
Yeah. Being healthy.
And just getting healthy. Was really focused on my diet at that time.
Yeah, I remember that.
I wasn't drinking much. Moving down south, my friends were all in Perth, so
it made a real lifestyle change, wasn't it?
Big lifestyle change. I could have gone out to try and meet people, but I just kind of kept to myself, kept healthy. And then, I think because I started surfing, I just became really close with the landscape of this area. I spent a lot of time, actually, one step back in Perth, I bought myself a nice camera. And that was when Instagram first started. And I was a pretty terrible photographer, but I think I had a good eye for the photos. I just needed to learn how to take the photos. So while I wasn't surfing here, I was taking my camera everywhere I went and started photography, and started posting on Instagram. And so I guess Salty Wings is photography, it's e-commerce, it's the ocean. So it's the combination of surfing, photography, and e-commerce. I guess the e-commerce comes from my economics background. That's what I was really interested in. So those three elements came together in 2015. And it was only because of my surf knowledge that I think I was good at drone photography.
Drone photography was just in its infancy as well, wasn't it? From a commercial landscape, artistic perspective. So it was a good another early move of yours, really.
Yeah, so that's another piece of the puzzle that just came together in 2015. I had a friend who bought a drone, and that was one of the earliest versions of a drone. And he was taking photos, and they were really popular on Instagram. People were asking him for prints of those photos.
Yes.
But then when me and him got together, I taught him about offshore winds and when the ocean will look pretty, when it will look nice. This is all based on surf knowledge, but
yes.
When the ocean looks nice for surfing is when it's best for photography as well.
Right.
Especially from a drone from the sky. You could take photos of a storm and that would be nice, but drones don't really like storms. So the best way to use a drone back then was in perfect, nice weather. So I combined the drone, the surf knowledge, and then the practice I've been doing with photography to,
and your knowledge of the landscape and the coast, and where to launch the drone and which beaches and formations to photograph. So
a big part of it was reading maps, looking at the landscapes, looking at where nice rocks were, also knowing just a lot of spots around here. But looking at the
so
maps.
who came up with the name Salty Wings?
So that was actually, some of my friends were on a fishing trip at the time, and I didn't go on the fishing trip because I was down here taking photos. But we had this group chat, and every second, everyone was calling each other salty dogs in this group chat because they all thought they were old school fishermen for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So the word salty dogs was just going through my mind, and then we're flying, and we kind of had this concept of an eagle. Like we came up with this story that an eagle with a GoPro was taking our photos, and we trained the eagle. So salty wings was a combination of salty dogs, the fisherman term. And then the wings of an eagle. Right. And it was just like a placer name for a while,
and here we are now. I mean, Salty Wings is an established brand name in the Australian, aerial photography, drone photography. It's some masterpieces out there. Some of your shots and prints, and I think most people who follow, the Instagram and follow the surfing and the coast would have come across Salty Wings now. It's anybody I've mentioned the name to is familiar with it. So well done, Mike. What a great, here we are 9 years later. Yeah. And who would have thought when you moved down to the Yallingup region, not sure what you're going to do, that you've made a living out of what you love, and you've got to, not only, I think you've toured Australia several times, still are, and some international expeditions as well. Yeah, you've been overseas a few times. Whereabouts have you been overseas?
Well, Australia is the bread and butter of our brand. So as much as I love the overseas trips,
so much here to capture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Australia that really captures everyone's attention, and all the customers are Australian. So internationally, like there was one amazing trip where we got invited to Tahiti, and got to go see Troipu, and that was probably the highlight. A bunch of Hawaiian surfers had come down to surf it was kind of a medium swell, but there wasn't much going on in Hawaii.
And you were doing the drone footage of the surf.
It was amazing.
And how different is that to your regular photography, where the camera is sort of stable?
For surf photography, do you mean?
You're moving along with the surfer.
Yeah, it's quite a skill. That's actually something I'm not focused on.
No.
There are some drone photographers that's all they do, and it's super skillful because you have to understand the line of the wave. So you have to understand where the wave's going to go. You have to understand the surfer and what patterns the surfer's going to do.
Yes.
It's a tough thing to do because you're flying backwards as well. Troipu, the way the wave breaks, the reef level and the wave, like the wave's much higher than the reef. So if you get your drone down at wave level, you got to be really careful not to fly backwards into a boat or the wave crash on the drone.
There's a lot involved.
Yeah. So
how do you juggle it now, mate? Because there'll be days when you want to get photos, but days when you want to go surfing, and it's like,
so
should I take photos or go for a surf, or do I?
Initially, I thought. Initially I was really into the surf photography, but over the years I've kind of just favored more landscapes, and that's kind of the customer's guidance as well. Yes. I remember in 2016, so this is only the first year of our business being up and running, but Instagram was already going quite well. We got a media pass for the surf comp at Margaret River, and I met Russell Ord.
Oh yeah.
And I saw him the other day, so I'm still chatting with him. But he kind of told me that surf photography industry was dead, and he'd seen the big changes in his years. People were now paying WSL to be the photographer rather than WSL paying photographers to come with them. That's how high the demand was for photographers to be there. And now that's changed. And then since then, now all the surfers...
They're employed in-house?
Well, all the surfers...
cameramen at a television station?
WSL will employ the cameramen that televise the event. Yes. But photographers around the event
Right.
are generally making their money doing something else. So
Mm-hmm.
all the surfers have their personal photographers and videographers now.
Right.
So they might make their money by being with the surfer, but you got to be tight with the surfer to get that
Right.
role.
Yeah.
So what Russell said is his prints of close-up photos of surfers didn't really sell, or that's what he told me at least. And like one thing he said was the photos that usually sell the best for him are the really pulled back, dreamy lineup shots where you can't really see any of the surfers or who they are. You just see the landscape, and you can imagine yourself in that landscape. So I've kind of taken that idea and run with it.
Yeah. I understand that as well, because Davey was did a lot of art for many years, and some of my favourite pieces of hers are portraits, right? And she's got amazing talent as a portrait artist, but no one wants to buy a portrait. It's like, who's that? Why am I hanging that?
Yeah.
I mean, she has been commissioned a few times, an amazing portrait, and people will mount that in their house, but there was no market in people buying random portraits, no matter how good they were, how much effort she put in them. Because people, we do get this connection to the landscape. There is that, I like the way you use the word imagination, because, if you can see yourself in the landscape, you can see yourself sitting there and, gazing out, then it brings that connection, doesn't it? And, and there's that sort of familiarity.
Yeah.
Okay, like, I know that feels like that sort of a day on that sort of a coast. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wish I could just follow surfing and make more of a living doing that, but it's been a bit of a battle, to be honest. Because when there's big swell, that's also not ideal for the types of photos I take now, because like a lot of the photos I like to take are still water. When you have big crashing waves, there's a lot of whitewash in the photo, and whitewash tends to blow out a photo and make it really hard to edit. So the more still the landscape and the ocean is, the easier it is to edit, and the more like dreamy and the more imagination you can put into that, the more creativity you can put into the edit of it.
Right, it becomes very artistic. I mean, I think some of your prints are, I think, around the Meal-up, Eagle Bay way. I
love shooting in Meal-up because there's no swell. It's just flat.
Yeah, and the water's so clear.
Yeah, so you can take photos.
Not as clear as Esperance, though, isn't it? Esperance water seems to be like...
No, but the rocks are a really nice feature. Meal-up's probably one of my favourite spots to take photos in Australia.
Yeah, right. That high.
Yeah.
In your...
It's just so consistent in summer. There's no swell, so it's always quite calm. And with the wind in summer being southerly most days, you get nice afternoons there.
It's a very special place, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they looked after it. I mean, it stayed very clean and very natural, and a lot of fun for families. And you've got the little creek there, and you've got the forest behind it. A couple of little walks you can do from Meal-up. Yeah, I love going over there in winter.
Yeah,
that's pretty much the time I go over there. On the stormy swells in winter.
Yeah, because I live in Dunsborough.
Right.
Even in summer, I go there a lot just to walk, even late in the afternoon to have a quick swim or to go for a walk. But yeah, back to your question about surfing and photography, it's always been like a tough thing for me. Like if the surf's on, I'll usually just surf.
Yeah.
Or try to get there earlier and take some photos before surfing. But yeah, the photography's pulled me away a bit from surfing too. Going up north in winters, like I've done a lot of winters in the north where there's no waves.
Right.
Instead of going on a surf trip where there is waves in winter. So it's slowed down the progression of my surfing quite a bit.
But you got to balance it, don't you? I mean, we all have to find that balance, and got that balance between work and is it work? I mean, when you're doing what you love, do you really do we call it work? I mean, like, that's
I think
from a younger person. Yeah, you think because you're approaching it professionally, there's a schedule, there's a program, you've got your goals and objectives and
like
and
I'm
budget.
kind of glad surfing isn't my work, because
Right.
that's the thing I do to just really
Right.
peace out and enjoy myself.
Uh-huh.
Possibly because I wasn't that good at photography when I started the business. Like,
Right.
I started with a business partner. He was the one that bought the first drone, and then if the listeners know, there's a drone called the DJI Phantom 3, I think it was. Yeah, the Phantom 3. That was like the first consumer drone. So you take it out of the box and it's ready to take photos that were good enough for print.
What year is this?
This is end of 2015.
Right.
So I've been living down south here for 6 months. Right. I've been coming to your place for yoga and stuff.
How much have drones progressed since then? I mean, that was the first, you said that was the first sort of like user friendly, take it out of the box and where you go.
They've progressed a lot, but there hasn't been many like major leaps forward. So the drone I'm using now is so much better in terms of the tech, but it's still the same thing as the drone I was using back then. It's still like the same idea.
Yeah, right.
Everything's the same. It's just way better now.
More nuanced and
and we went through
more options.
We went through a phase of buying like a really big drone that had a bigger camera on it, and that was a huge leap forward because the camera was so much better, but the drone was just so much bigger and louder, and there was a lot more resistance to me wanting to use it.
Yeah, right.
It was okay, like at a
bit more stealth.
Yeah, well, like I'd go out for sunrise or sunset and there'll be no one around, but then I'd discover there were a few people around and they'd be flying this helicopter over their head. I always felt bad. Hopefully, like the photos were worth it, but it was super disruptive.
Yeah, okay.
So like just before this morning, I went and took some photos in Yellingup, and the drone I have now is like this big, so like the size of a dinner plate sort of thing. When it's folded up, I can hold it in my palm. I could put it in the pocket of my shorts, and that's one of the bigger drones out there now.
And you're operating that with your mobile phone? Is that?
You can operate it with your mobile phone if you want to, but I've got a dedicated controller which is better than a mobile phone. It's like got joysticks and the screen's super bright, so I can use it in the middle of the day in summer. Phones are don't have quite as bright a screen.
The other day you were telling me that you were able to send your drone out nearly 2 kilometres to get the photos of the whale sharks in Esperance. I mean, so what is the range of them now? What do you?
Yeah, so the specs of the new drones have just gone through the roof. The original drone, you could maybe fly it a few hundred meters and then it would start to disconnect. And the drone I use disconnected all the time because I was always pushing it. The new drone I have never disconnects. Like I haven't pushed it to its limit yet. I reckon it could go 10 Ks out to sea.
Wow.
If I spent the whole battery just flying as far as I could and then as far as I could back, I reckon you could get 10 Ks. But
and is it communicating? How's it communicating? Is it radio waves or Bluetooth? What's the medium?
Radio waves.
Yeah, okay.
Like an old school remote control car.
Right.
Sort of thing. I'm not sure exactly. I don't spend too much time looking into because like I remember when I was a kid and I had a remote control car, and you had to know things like that. Because there was so much interference from other controllers.
Right.
You had to pick your radio frequency.
Yeah.
And you can do that on the drone controller now. You can pick your radio frequency.
Okay.
But they're just so smart now that if there's interference, they'll switch frequency for you. So you just get no interruption.
So you can operate them where there's no internet connection. Of course, you must be. You're in isolated places all the time.
Yeah, there's no internet connection. They have GPS. So they try to connect to 12 or more satellites.
Right.
Once you got about 12 satellites, you've got the drone knows where it's come from, like its home point. Which is where you're standing, or wherever you want your home point to be. and then it connects to these satellites so that if you let go of the controller and you walk away from it, the drone will just hover there, and then once the battery is running out, it will land itself back at the home point.
Right.
So if your controller breaks or something, if you're on if you drop it in water and it broke, the drone would come back and land by itself. They're pretty spectacular now. 10K range. You can't go out of line of sight. That's one limitation. So if you go behind a rock wall or something, it will disconnect. But then with the GPS location, it will follow its path back to where it came from. So the original drones would just like fly straight back to the home point.
Yes.
These ones will follow their path and avoid obstacles on their way back.
So what a journey, eh? Salty Wings, what a great little business you've established, and it keeps you on the road, keeps you moving around, seeing new places. Your meal ups are good. You love meal up. Where else in Australia would you? Injun Beach. I know you took a good photo of our local beach here that became quite famous, I believe. But
talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know whether you can talk about that because of copyright, but.
Yeah, so we sold a photo to Apple.
Okay.
They used it as the iOS 11 screensaver. So when you took the phone out of the box, that was the photo that everyone had as their default screensaver.
I'm just so glad they didn't put this photo is of Injun Beach.
Yeah, everyone go there. So we sold it to them outright. We signed an NDA about agreement and stuff.
Yes.
I think enough time's passed now that they don't use it anymore. We can kind of talk about it, but it's their photo. We can't use that photo, so we're not allowed to post it and say this is our photo. We're not allowed to use it on our website because they own the photo.
Right.
But it was a photo from Injured Up Beach.
Yeah.
So just down the road here. That was actually taken during the Surf Pro, the Surf Comp. Went to photograph a surfer who was at the wedge taking photos and just flew down the beach and took a couple shots. So that was a great little coincidence.
Yeah.
But so I think over 1 billion people downloaded iOS 11. So 1 billion plus people would have seen that photo.
Not many artists can claim that. Right?
Yeah. So even though no one knows it was us. And it was like me and my business partner were switching the controller at the time.
Okay.
Neither of us know who took that specific photo. We're both taking photos of the same spot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool too.
It is,
I can't claim it as mine. He can't claim it as his, but it's ours.
Divine sort of intervention there to the partnership.
But over 1 billion people saw that photo. So that's pretty cool. I've done something that 1 billion people have seen. And I still see it now, like in movies and stuff. I'll watch a Hollywood movie and someone will look at their phone and it's a photo of Injured Up. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's going to be a big year for you this year, isn't it? In other ways.
Yeah.
A family coming on. So I was going to ask you whether there's anything you'd wanted to say about Bitcoin as well while you're here. I know we've had many discussions about that over the years, and it's familiar to everybody now. Not everybody has participated in it, and I think people approach it from some people approach it from a speculative point of view. Some people approaching it from a long-term investment point of view. Some people approaching it from a diversification, like we've got money in the bank, maybe you've got some gold and silver, and you've got some Bitcoin, and then there's those that approach it from like economic background, which you did, because it's decentralized, it's super private, and it's not relying on any one institution. So it's by definition, it's the closest thing you get to an uncontrolled, pure market in a way. So But it is still dependent on the internet, isn't it? I mean, that's that lack of physicality about it. But we know the world's going that way anyway. I mean, money's already, our bank account are really just zeros and ones, digital in a way. So it's been a good investment for those who got in 10, 15 years ago. It's been an incredible investment, right? And today, I don't know what it is today, but I guess it's irrelevant really, because, say it's $60,000 or somewhere like that. I mean, it could be, if you're a speculative investor, you want it to be $80,000 in 6 months' time or 12 months' time. But if you're just hanging onto it for the long term, I guess the fluctuations, on a daily basis and monthly basis it's more of a store of wealth when you approach it from that point of view. Would that be how you would promote it to people, like, or if someone's a trader, here, trade. Why not trade Bitcoins as well as anything else?
It's so many things, all in one.
Correct.
So there is no one way to define it or say I own it because it's a store of wealth. That's true.
Right.
That's true, but there's so many other truths.
Okay.
There's so many other perspectives.
Right.
So I'd ask, why do you use the internet? Or if I asked you back in the 90s, why do you use the internet? You might say, my business has started sending emails. So now I have an email address and I send emails. And back then, a lot of people might think this is all the internet's ever going to be, is some emails. But now we've got all kinds of crazy things that people couldn't imagine back then. I think Bitcoin is very similar. It's a new technology that we don't understand yet. And different people have different levels of understanding of what it is. But even my perspective, I've known about it for 10 years. I think in another 10 years, there's going to be so many features and perspectives and ways of looking at it that I couldn't imagine now. Yeah.
It definitely does seem to be a permanent fixture. Like, anybody thought it was an overnight sort of thing. It's like, I think, satisfied now that it's not going away, that it is here.
Yeah.
It's just a question of how do I approach it, and for what reason do I approach it on the basis of now.
Like if you wanted to ask me what are my perspectives, we could be here for hours.
Yeah, sure.
And I wouldn't be able to think of all the perspectives. There's so many,
right,
so many different ways to come at it. Maybe like it's best for me to ask you. You just named a number of reasons why you might invest in it. Why? Actually, I want to ask you, why don't you own any Bitcoin?
Well, that's a good point, because I'm tech lazy, I guess.
Yeah.
And a bit old school.
Yeah.
So they're the sort of two initial barriers. But
do you own stocks?
But I own stocks, and I'm tech enough to be able to sort of to do that. But I still I'm still old school, ring a stockbroker.
Okay.
But I'm also satisfied that it is a long-term store of wealth, and I'm satisfied that it's safe and it's secure, and that I'm also satisfied that from a portfolio point of view, it makes sense from diversification, right?
Yeah.
Would I put all my eggs in one basket? I'm still not at that point. But I can definitely see a place for it in a diversification process. And, I also used to have the usual sort of resistance about, okay, what can I actually use it for? Like, what can I actually buy Bitcoins with, right?
Yeah.
Can I go to the shops? Can I pay for my fuel, etc., etc.? But I'm not so hung up on that anymore either. That wouldn't be the hurdle that it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
But we get easier on that aspect.
Yeah. So I think like currency is one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
store of value is another aspect that you mentioned. So in terms of store of value, I still own a bit of gold and silver. As you mentioned, they're physical. To me, gold and silver is kind of like doomsday money now. If the internet goes out and everything goes out, gold and silver is probably useful.
And that's not the sort of thing we want to plan for, or sort of,
Yeah. I mean, like central
much.
banks are still buying gold and silver in huge quantities, so the bankers still value gold as a store of wealth. But yeah, I think even if the internet did go out, you can still use Bitcoin as long as you can maybe, if your phone's working and you have the right software on your phone, you could still send a transaction to somebody else.
Okay.
And it would work. You'd still, so if you went to the shops and they accepted Bitcoin, you'd still be able to send a transaction to them. They would be able to see that you've sent the transaction to them, but they would have to trust you as a person, because they wouldn't be able to get the confirmation that that transaction is legit
from the internet.
Right. So if somebody wanted to do like $1 million transaction and the internet wasn't working, I'd probably say, no, I'm going to wait till the internet is back up and running. But if it's just for coffees from your local shop, maybe fruits and like groceries, and you knew the person that owned the shop, they knew you, then it'll be fine.
Okay.
They can trust you.
Right.
So you can still make transactions. You just need to broadcast them to the network eventually. So yeah. But from that perspective, like if the internet goes down, lots of things are not going to work.
Correct.
There's going to be a lot of trouble.
Yeah. It's
like your regular bank account.
Regular banking is not
going to work.
No.
If you don't have cash, you're in trouble. And if cash is going away, then Bitcoin might be a better alternative. And still, I think from that perspective, still better than gold and silver. Right. Because you can still run it from an app from your phone, as long as your phone's got power.
And if you've got phone service.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't even need the phone service. You just need, this is probably something I need to study more, but you can create like networks, local networks. Mm-hmm. You could run a local network economy on Bitcoin. There would be ways to do it.
Well, I like that idea of the local network. One of the themes that we've been working through with some of the people that have come on this podcast, particularly Greg Campbell and some of the others, have been about community and initiatives and ideas and proposals for really decentralising decision making and responsibility, and everything from health, medicine, education, food, water supply. I mean, there's so much more so many great ideas and opportunities to get more involved at a regional level, at a local level, and the theme really is like, how much can we take back responsibility for? Right? Because the old model, is broken. Like the days of saying, well, the government's got to solve all of our problems. Every time you hear that, someone talks about an issue, the government should fix it.
Yeah.
Well, the government don't fix it, generally. They're getting less efficient, more bureaucratic, higher costs, taxes going up, and they're not achieving the outcomes quite often in a lot of areas. So we've got to, how do we turn that ship around? Well, it's communities coming together and saying, what can we get more involved in? What can we take more responsibility for?
Yeah, and so currency is an interesting one.
Concepts like, homeschooling, home education, home birthing, wellness, alternative therapies, and you've got to say, well, what about finance? How's the money and the economic model going to look like where you're in a regional setting, and seeing?
I think it's going to be a lot more complicated than we can imagine.
Right.
So one thing you said before is, can I use Bitcoin down the local shops?
Yes.
My first answer to that would be, why would you want to spend Bitcoin when it's a deflationary currency and it's going up in value? If you already have Australian dollars and they're working, then you want to spend those dollars
because they're going down in
as
value
quickly as possible
at the rate of 10 or 20% per annum.
Yeah, inflation is guaranteed.
Absolutely. Deteriorating in buying power.
Yeah, so you may as well spend the Aussie dollars first. So that's what I do. Like I earn Aussie dollars. I'm not going to spend any Bitcoin if I don't have to.
Yep.
I'll absolutely spend the Aussie dollars first, which means I'm not actually using Bitcoin as a day-to-day currency yet. It's more of a store of value. But that also being said, I think the future of currency will be so much more complicated than just everybody's going to use Bitcoin. I know some of my friends over East are involved in this local community currency.
Right.
And I'm not sure exactly how it works, but something to do with the amount of work you put into this community, you get rewarded with this currency, and it's a trust-based system.
Excellent.
But a currency like that can only work on a local scale where you trust everyone involved.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a lot of those. I think
there might be able to be some interface and some infrastructure to help.
There already is interface where
network these.
Some of the local exchanges will let you trade that currency for Bitcoin or Aussie dollars.
Yeah.
So that's one way to create a currency.
Maybe you might hook me up with these people and put me in touch with someone from that.
Yeah, I could show you the website.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is over Byron Bay Way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think also like tokenizing stuff like stocks, commodities, all kinds of things will get tokenized, and those will be used as currency as well. So I don't think currencies
even having tokens for metals now, like silver tokens and gold tokens, so you can trade the tokens.
Yeah, and they're just linked to the value of the actual commodity that's fluctuating underneath. Correct. They're not ideal as well, but they will work. Like stocks, everything will be tokenized and turned into currency.
Yes.
So what we see as currency now is like the Australian dollar. Our current consciousness of money is there's one money.
Yes.
And that's the Australian dollar.
Yeah, right.
And so a lot of people, like when they're asking me about Bitcoin, and they're like, well, is Bitcoin going to become the one money? I don't think that's the answer. I think we're going into a world of diversity.
Yeah, many layers. And
so the government might continue the Australian dollar, and that might become one of hundreds or thousands of different currencies that we use.
Yeah.
Interesting. Dog having fun in the background. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting world, but the role... Dog's distracting.
He's chasing his tail.
Yeah, I think the role of Bitcoin is more of a backbone, more of a store of value that will become the interface between
all an established infrastructure.
Yeah, so it can become the collateral or the store of value that everything else interfaces with. So as a consumer going down to the shops, I might be spending all kinds of things.
Yes.
But on the back end of everything, I think the Bitcoin network is going to be the network that
it's the platform or the foundational platform.
So one perspective of Bitcoin is it's a protocol, and the internet is built on layers of protocols all interacting with each other.
Okay.
I think there's 7 protocol layers that make up the internet now, and Bitcoin will become the 8th layer if Bitcoin's adopted worldwide.
Yes.
And so Bitcoin will become the value layer of the internet.
Right.
Which is a huge missing piece, because like e-commerce with credit cards is pretty terrible. You need to ask the bank for permission. The bank will pay the person you're paying, and then there's like a 30-day wait period before the bank will finalize that transaction, because there might be fraud. There's all kinds of things wrong with the current financial system for the internet. It wasn't designed for the internet. So if there's a protocol layer that's built into the internet with instant value transfer, that can be guaranteed instantly, or for large sums of money, like maybe you'll wait for a couple more confirmations.
Right.
Just a technical thing to talk about, but
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Even for like $1 million transactions, half an hour would be enough time to guarantee that transaction. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a very complicated world, and Bitcoin's going to be a big part of it.
Right. Well, as usual, Mike, you know, your insight is valuable and really appreciated, and I've always enjoyed your perspective on these areas, and I'm sure many of the listeners will as well, because it is a piece of the whole conversation and going forward. You know, all the things that we value in life, and they really are values. Like, and this is one of those things that has a value attached to it. So yeah, it asks us to reflect on what we put our value on. Right?
Yeah. One thing you were talking about before with what can we take our power back with?
Yes.
I think like Bitcoin is a very big piece to that puzzle.
Yes.
Because you were talking about water, health, all these things.
Correct.
A big part of sovereignty is power, power production. And what Bitcoin's going to do is become linked in with the power industry. So what's called Bitcoin mining, which is the computer network that makes Bitcoin work without getting too technical about what it is. The Bitcoin computer network and the energy production industry are going to merge and become one industry. And the reason for that is because current energy production has a lot of wasted energy. There's no way for energy producers to perfectly predict the amount of energy they need to produce. A lot of energy production is super wasteful, or it's underproduced. What Bitcoin does is allow every single excess watt that's produced by the energy producers to be consumed by Bitcoin miners. So every single energy producer will have these Bitcoin miners either like at the power station linked to it, or purchasing all the electricity directly from them downstream. And every bit of wasted energy will be stored in the Bitcoin network. So Bitcoin becomes kind of this energy battery that we've never had before. Any new energy production, so if you want to create a small scale energy production in this area, you can guarantee some revenue from that energy production, because even if no one uses your energy production, you can sell it all to Bitcoin miners, and they can use that energy to
So it almost underwrites the decentralized
energy
power supply.
Yeah, exactly.
De-linked from the grid.
It underwrites it, and it creates an instant revenue model for any energy production. So it makes all these fringe energy projects viable,
right?
Or at least like minimizes the risk.
That's fascinating.
Risk of
you know, I haven't heard that before, and I'm sure many listeners haven't heard that link there. Maybe we could, that could be a good point to sort of bring the conversation to an end for this episode. It could be the something we could bring up in another episode, Mike, because I'm sure we'll get together again.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to talk about it.
We can do it on Zoom too. We don't always have to be in person, because I know you're going to be back on the road, Salty Wings and your other activities over the next year or so. So all the best. Thanks for coming on to The Last Wave. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good on you.
Interesting.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah.